Hello, 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 free thinking ministry bros. It's and not just bros,
and
women
sisters.
and
Yes.
sisters. Merry Christmas. I think this should be debuting like after Christmas.
Oh, wow. Okay.
To you, Tim.
What? What about me?
Christmas. Merry Christmas.
Oh, Merry Christmas to you too,
I'm,
Josh.
I'm just saying Merry Christmas. Happy holidays.
Happy holy days.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. That's what it comes from.
Yes.
Yeah. So we are recording this before Christmas, but we are going to be releasing it after Christmas. So if you are bored the day after Christmas on December 26th, please watch this video with your family. It's going to be riveting. It's like watch It's a Wonderful Life on December 25th, and then watch Tim and I answer questions on December 26th.
Well, when are folks going to watch Home Alone?
I've already watched it.
You've already watched that. Okay. What about Elf? You got to watch Elf.
Got to watch Elf. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Comment below if you're watching this video your favorite Christmas movie.
And Die Hard.
Die Hard. Do you believe Die Hard is a Christmas movie, Tim?
It's become one because of all the controversy. So now you got to watch it. It wasn't before, but because of the last few years, all the debate, and then I watched it a few years ago just to see, and I was like, okay, well now it's tradition. So there you go.
He does say Merry Christmas in the movie.
Yes.
He does. It's followed by an expletive, but he does say Merry Christmas.
Colorful language.
Yes. Well, it's been a while since we've been together on here, and it's been a while since we've been together and not talking political things, right? So
I'm glad that season's over. Of course, we seek to apply logic and sound theology to all aspects of life. And so politics isn't going away. So we will continue to talk politics. But yeah, this last political season was long and heated, a lot of emotions involved,
Absolutely.
and a lot of stuff happened that I'm just glad that season's over for now. I'm sure we're not done talking about those things, but I'm ready to get back to the normal kinds of, the topics that we discuss here at FreeThinking Ministries. So
absolutely. And if you've gotten this far in the video, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Hit the notification bell. Let us know. Make sure you know whenever the day after Christmas a movie, or it's not a movie, a podcast pops up, that you'll be able to watch it. And as we talk about that, let's talk quickly about our friends at Mead Ammo, shall we?
Oh,
shall we, Tim? Mead Ammo. We've got great friends at Mead Ammo. Tim, you and I often say, if you want arguments to demolish, you come to FreeThinking Ministries. We'll give you arguments to destroy and demolish.
Every argument raised against the knowledge of God.
Exactly. But if you want ammunition to destroy anything that's raised against you in a threatening way, or maybe just a target or something like that,
paper, steel targets, doesn't matter.
Absolutely. Mead Ammo is the place for you. Go to meadammo.com. They're great people, locally owned, but nationally recognized. At least
they are,
as far as I know. So,
and they hook me up when I do during the summers. I compete a lot in 3-gun competitions, and they've been hooking me up with fantastic ammo, no failures, and it's just running great for me. So thanks to everybody at meadammo.com.
Yes. Meadammo.com. Go look at their catalog, and then tell them in the comments when you buy stuff that FreeThinking Ministries sent you. We don't have a promo code to give you for any amount off, but maybe someday.
Yeah. Just tell them you want the FreeThinking Ministries discount. See what happens.
Just and they'll send us an email. We never promised this. All right. So today what we're doing is we are doing 13 burning questions for the FreeThinking Ministry team. Now, some of the questions are multi-pronged, so there will probably be more than 13 questions asked, but we have 13 questions that were submitted to our Q&A page. So if you want to be involved,
I have not seen any of these.
Tim has not seen them. I have curated them, looked through them, combined a few of them because they covered the same topics. If you want to be involved in one of these episodes in the future, all you have to go to is freethinkingministries.com and go to the Contact Us page. You type in your name, you type in whatever you want in the Contact Us, and then we curate those, or I curate those throughout the time, and then we spend time doing this. We've done this once before. We're doing it again here at the end of the year. We've got 13 questions. Dr. Tim Stratton, are you ready?
I am ready. Just, for the folks watching at home, you might be curious about my surroundings. I'm here in the official Free Thinking Ministries office building. Just kidding. We don't have one of those yet, but I'm here at the local Chamber of Commerce building here in Kearney, Nebraska, and they've allowed me to come use their facilities every once in a while, or on a regular basis, actually. So thank you to Kearney Area Chamber of Commerce. And there's, the lighting here isn't ready yet. They just built this building, so I don't have a professional studio yet. They are working on that. Apologize for the lighting. Hopefully you can hear me okay. But yeah, you might see some people walking in the background too, so don't be distracted.
Yep. Or do be distracted. It's not. We're not telling you. Yeah, just, you know what? Try to focus, people. Come on. Yeah. All right. So the first question, I'm going to say the first names of these people, not their last names, because if you've sent a question in, you are not agreeing to having us blast your name all over the internet. But James asks this first question, and he says this: I can't remember ever hearing or reading of a Calvinist refer to this passage, but could you help me understand Revelation 17, verse 8? Thank you. Revelation 17, verse 8. Now, I am going to share my screen here because I've got this passage pulled up in the NASB. I'm going to do this. Hopefully people can see that. All right, so this is what the passage says, Tim, and then we'll get your take on it, or my take on it. The beast that you saw was and is not, and is about to come up out of the abyss and go to destruction, and those who dwell on the earth, whose name has not been written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, will wonder when they see the beast that he was and is not and will come. All right, so does it surprise you that James has never heard a Calvinist talk about this passage, first of
all? Well, I guess I've never heard any Calvinist arguments based on that passage. At least I can't recall any. But I'm sure many Calvinists have talked about this passage because there's so many Calvinist pastors who preach through the Bible. And so you would expect Calvinists to speak on this passage, but I don't know what arguments. Well, you know what? So I'm looking at my phone now here too.
Okay.
So the beast that you saw was and is not and is about to rise from the bottomless pit, the infinitely tall bottomless pit, by the way. Have fun jumping out of that thing. And go to destruction. And the dwellers on earth, whose names have not been written in the book of life from the foundation of the world. Okay, so maybe I think he's probably touching on some predestination issues here, which the Molinist agrees to and with, by the way. So, and the dwellers on earth, whose names have not been written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, will marvel to see the beast, because it was and is not and is to come. Okay. So a couple things. I think this is mostly problematic for open theists, my open theist friends. Consider them good friends, by the way. But it's also why I'm not an open theist, is because I think there's too many passages in scripture that have this predestination language. And here we're looking at the specific names, not just a group of people, but the specific names of people whose, their names were not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world. So, and I think of Psalm 139 as well. Psalm 139 talks about how God knows the words that are going to come out of our mouths even before they form on our tongue, something along those lines. In that same passage, it talks about those whose names were written in the book of life prior to the foundations of the world. So, I should say, though. So every day in that path, every day of our lives is written down, or as it were, God knows our days um, prior to our first day. Well, if that's the case, and this is true of each person individually, then it's really hard for me to reconcile open theism with that view. And I think that's a common sense interpretation of the passage. Now, of course, my open theist friends are going to have, ways that they think that passage ought to be interpreted, and we're going to disagree on that. But I do think it's a common sense, rational interpretation to say, well, yeah, here, even in Revelation, the dwellers on earth whose names have not been written in the book of life from the foundation of the world. All right. Another way to say that is the names who God knew would eternally reject him. All right. So middle knowledge can apply. It's not like there's a literal book that God takes a pen and writes the names down. All right. This is a language that is meant to communicate what God knows. And I think middle knowledge solves the problem here. God knows who, prior to creating the world, the specific world, God knows who would freely choose to reject Christ, to reject Christ into the infinite future. God knows that prior to his creative decree, prior to saying, let there be, boom. God knows this because he's necessarily omniscient. Now, his knowledge doesn't cause things to happen, right? Knowledge doesn't stand in causal relation, so it doesn't violate libertarian freedom here. So anyway, so is this guy's question, what is it about Calvinism and this guy's question again? Can you remind me what he said?
Yeah, I don't know. He just says he has never heard a Calvinist talk on the topic, and he asks if you could help him understand Revelation 17:8 and what it means. So I think you're doing a great job of talking about it from like a philosophical, deterministic or indeterministic middle knowledge point of view.
I just say it works with the Calvinist determinism or the Molinists' indeterministic libertarian free will divine middle knowledge view.
Yeah,
I think the biggest problem it's for the open theist here. So
I would agree, and I don't think this is a proof text for any sort of the only thing you could use it for foreknowledge is that their names have been written in the book of life from the foundation of the world.
Yeah.
Now, if he's just asking what the passage means, like just help him understand what the passage means in general, here's what I would say. Revelation is a very hard book.
Hardest book.
It is the hardest book, I think, of the Bible to understand, to figure out, because unless you're a full preterist, which I don't think anyone should be, but and that just means people think Jesus came back already. But unless you're a full preterist, you believe that aspects of the book of Revelation have not been fulfilled yet. So we don't know exactly what these things mean. So I find what I find in Revelation is basically the whole point of Revelation is who is worthy of worship and who is going to win in the end. That's who's worthy of worship.
Yeah, that's right.
And if I were to boil it down into one sentence, this particular passage, I suppose I would say it seems to be talking more about kingdoms, like a beast is a kingdom or a type of king, even in the explanations in the following verses, which is why I moved it out. If you're wondering who the beast is the beast the devil? No, the beast isn't the devil. The dragon's the devil. So the beast is something else. It's some sort of kingdom or king that is antichrist. And I don't mean antichrist with a capital A. I just mean, antichrist just in general, antichrist. And this kingdom will seek to rule the world, and the people who fall for his deception or its deception are the ones that's named not written in the book of life. Which reminds me, do you remember, Tim, when COVID came out and they were talking about the vaccine, and there were a bunch of people talking about the vaccine being the mark of the beast? Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. I remember
that. Yeah.
Yeah. I got into an online kind of kerfuffle with one of my old friends because he was convinced that the vaccine was going to be the mark of the beast, that if you take it, somehow you'd be duped into worshiping.
Hold on one second here. Everybody, say hi to my buddy Riley Mills. Tell him about your show.
My show.
Yeah.
Podcast?
Well, yeah, your podcast.
Yeah, it's called Make a Move. And so we find cool people like Tim that are making moves and find out how they're doing it.
Yeah,
so.
I've been on a show before.
Nice.
So, yeah, where can they find it?
Make a Move.
Make a
on
Move.
all the platforms.
Oh, okay. Yep. Yeah, so check it out. Subscribe. He needs to move my Jeep for an electrician.
Yeah,
all right.
Hey, thanks.
Good to see you, brother.
Look at that. Just perfect. We're not even doing this live and we're getting shout outs live. So that's great. So that's all I would say. Like, if you're looking for just a general explanation of the passage, I think Tim did a good job of explicating. That's a complicated word. Explicating the who would be a proof text for, or what if it has problems for Molinism or Calvinism, which we don't think it does. But if you're looking for just a general, like, what does this mean? That tends to be the straightforward reading of it. But there are a ton of other interpretations because, once again, there are aspects of Revelation we just don't quite understand and don't know. And everyone has opinions on. And I'm not going to give necessarily my specific opinion here, but do you have anything to say concerning that, Tim, before we move on?
Concerning what specifically?
Well, just if you feel like I'm kind of on the right track with the general meaning of the passage, or
yeah, no, I think you've done a good job explaining the general meaning. I think I've explained how it is or is not connected to sovereignty, predestination, and the whole issue between Calvinists, Molinists, and open theists. So ultimately, I think what I'd be concerned about talking about God's sovereignty. And how, what God knows. I think a rational interpretation of this. Now, look, what I'm saying when I say irrational, I mean it's not irrational to conclude this, right? Yeah. Even if it's wrong, right here, based on the data we have, one cannot be accused of being irrational to conclude, wow, okay, God knows the specific names of people who are going to reject God into the infinite future and those who are not. I think we can do you think that that's fair?
I think so.
I mean, it seems that that's what I think that's what it means.
I think you would have to do some exegetical gymnastics to get around that.
Right.
I suppose perhaps if I were to try to put on an open theist cap real quick, that they might say that the passage basically is just saying that they've not been written in the book of life from the foundation. So up until this point, like they're not written. It's not talking about in perpetuity into the future.
Yeah.
I don't think that's right, but to me, I think that might be a response. Yeah. Regardless, I don't think it's a proof text.
Right.
Either way.
Yeah.
Right.
And like I said, I used to think open theism was heretical. I don't think that anymore because I think I understood a straw man version of it, because I used to say, well, open theists reject God's omniscience.
Yeah.
And they don't. They say that God knows everything that's logically possible to know, which even according to them would be a whole lot of stuff, right?
Yeah.
They just say that the future truth values to future propositions are not something that is logically possible to know. And so I disagree with that. I think, so look, if we didn't have God's word, if we didn't have the Bible, I'd be more inclined to be an open theist than I am a Molinist. But since we have scripture, there's a whole bunch of it that really seems to point to the fact that God knows the future. And if I'm not going to violate the libertarian freedom involved in knowing the future, then I think Molinism's your only way to do that. So anyway, I just want to give a shout out to my open theist friends. I'm not trying to throw you guys under the bus, trying to treat you guys fairly here, and want to keep my friendship, our friendship intact.
Yeah.
And
I think you just accused them of not reading the Bible, so that's the.
No, I did not. Did not do that.
I think something you said there, and then we'll move on to the next question. Is really important because people have said, similar things to the Molinist, right? Like, well, you just don't believe God is totally sovereign, right? And it's going, well, no, we have different understandings of what that sovereignty means,
Mhm.
right? And so the open theist would say the same thing with omniscience. Like, no, you're telling me you're using your definition of omniscience, where
Yeah.
I don't think it fits. So it's similar. So I think that's not just gracious. I think that's you're trying to steel man someone else's position. I think that's good.
Yeah. Cool.
All right, let's move on to the next question. Unless you have got more to say on that.
Nope. That's good.
All right. All right, this one is from Bill. And Bill says, I hope you are doing well and are staying healthy. Same to you, Bill. I hope you're doing well and staying healthy too. I was going through your book recently. I assume he means yours and not my novel, because otherwise this question wouldn't make sense. And I was hoping you could help me with a moral dilemma I was thinking about. The moral dilemma is basically what obligations trumps the other. In the Bible, we have an obligation to our families to protect and take care of them. But we also have an obligation to foreigners and refugees who need help. But my dilemma is, what if helping refugees puts your family and fellow citizens at risks? Possibly letting refugees in the country that may be criminals or terrorists. What one trumps the other? Is our obligation to protect our families first, or should there be risk involved with accepting refugees into the country that may be detrimental? Thank you for your time. That's from Bill.
Yeah. Bill Craig?
No, it's not from Bill Craig.
Oh,
I said I wasn't saying last names.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
No. So interesting that he connected it to my book. I guess I do discuss the moral argument and objective morality a bit in a couple chapters. So I do see how it's related, I guess. So obligations.
Yeah. Can
to
I say, I
family,
think,
yeah.
yeah, can I say quickly, I think there might be a little bit of, I don't know if category error is the right term, but that's what, so the question is, the Bible's talking about how individuals ought to treat foreigners, but then the question kind of morphs in, how should our country treat immigration, right?
Right. Which I don't get into in my book.
Yeah.
Not the scope of the book there. But yeah, this really, I think, gets us into a lot of the stuff that we've been talking about over the past several months on the political things. So, Josh, why don't you take it? Yeah.
So I think it's a mistake to say that to conflate the two, how a government ought to treat refugees with how I as an individual ought to. And I've said this for a lot of things. The government, Acts 17 says that God has established his boundaries of nations. And so if that's the case, then borders and boundaries and who can and cannot be a citizen is actually a God-ordained thing of what a nation ought to do. At the same time, the scripture is very clear that we ought to treat individually foreigners well, and we should care for them. And so if I have somebody that moves next door to me, in fact, we have a Colombian family that moves next door to me. Now, whether or not they are legal residents of the United States is of no import to me specifically. I am supposed to treat them as anyone would treat another person and human being. And so I should relate to them well as a Christian and love them and care for them. Now, if the country chooses to enforce immigration law, as long as it's not unethical, I think it is fully not only within the rights of the country to do that, but it is moral. And so a country does not have the moral obligation to let every single person come into their country, especially terrorists and people who are going to destroy people. And let me kind of maybe use a word picture. Let's say our house is the country. My house is the country. I do not have the obligation of letting anybody come into my house, right?
That would not be loving to your family.
It would not be loving to my family. And frankly, it wouldn't be loving to every person either, because I couldn't actually treat them all well if I'm just letting anybody who wants to come sleep into my house into my house. I wouldn't be able to care for them well. I wouldn't be able to know them well. I would, like, if I just let that happen, it's not actually loving just to let anybody come sleep on your couch. And so I have the obligation to treat people well, but also have boundaries through which they can gain access to my family and my house and my belongings. I think those things are not in conflict with one another. That doesn't mean I should beat and kick and maim a person that comes into my house. However, if they come into my house illegally, if they break through my window, then I have no moral obligation to treat them, to allow them to commit a crime. It's actually loving to me to stop them from committing the crime with whatever force I need to, and loving.
And maybe now is a good time to talk about meat ammo once again.
Yes, maybe that's the case.
Meat ammo.
And so I think, morally speaking, I don't think these are in conflict. I do think there's a hierarchy, morally speaking, like the question of, would you lie to a Nazi if you were keeping Jews in the basement in World War II Germany? I do think it is moral to say, no, I am not hiding Jews in the basement.
Yeah.
If you know they're going to leave,
is to deceive evil at that point.
Yes, the right thing to do is to deceive evil, and I think my proof text for that is what Rahab does for the spies in Jericho. She's actually lauded by God for choosing not just the lesser of two evils, but choosing to do an untruthful thing in the face of abject evil. God understands that the world in which we live is not black and white in those scenarios, and so He's going to reward the more moral thing. That's the stand. Some people are moral absolutists that don't have that stand, but that's,
and they would be the same ones that would say it's immoral to ever shoot anybody in self-defense or to even punch somebody in self-defense.
Yeah, so that's kind of John Piper's stand, right? Like,
I think he's dead wrong.
I absolutely do too.
Yeah. See my article, "Love Thy Neighbor and Pack Thy Heat," for the arguments as to why John Piper's wrong.
Yeah. So is there anything there that you'd like to add? Those are the things that I would say to Bill.
I agree with you 100%.
Okay. All right. Are you ready to move on to the next one?
Let's go. 3.
All right. This is from Abe, number 3, the third burning question. This one is kind of long, but it is important to know that Abe lives in Chicago. Okay. So he says he's really appreciative of our writing, especially our strong stance on the recent election. Thank you, Abe. Appreciate that. He sent his articles out to several family and friends, our articles. And unfortunately, he said they ended up offending a few. Yeah, we kind of experienced that as well. He says it was very well written and clear. I promise I'm not just reading this to make your head get bigger, Tim. So he actually had a good friend who is an accomplished medical malpractice defense attorney that found our arguments to be well thought out and convincing.
Nice.
And he says this, so this is probably more of a feather in your cap than anything. He says he's found himself, thankfully, losing almost all his specifically Calvinist convictions.
Oh, wow.
With a resurgent and clearer love for our Savior. And very happy to know that we share that in common as well. So he is very thankful for FreeThinking Ministries. So thank you, Abe, for writing this. So here's his question. He's wondering if you happen to have any recommendations for solid church that is both theologically and politically conservative and non-Calvinist. It seems that every Bible-centered church is either Calvinist explicitly or subtly, kind of in parentheses, and very often takes a nuanced view on supporting abortion, promoting politicians, perhaps 501c3 self-protective approach. We're in Wheaton, Illinois. Area, which you would think would make this process easy. No worries if you don't have any suggestions. Regardless, I just wanted you to know that I appreciate your work and look forward to learning more from you. All right, that's from Abe. Like I said, that was long. But do you have any way that you would point? And I know neither of us live in Wheaton or in Chicago, in the Chicago area or in Illinois, but do you have any contacts out there, any people that might be able to point him in the direction of a church?
Well, to anybody who might be watching this who went to Wheaton College, is it Wheaton College or University? I'm not sure. I know Bill Craig did his undergrad at Wheaton, I believe. So I know there's, and I do have some friends who attended Wheaton, so I could talk to them to see if they have any recommendations. I can't give any specifics right now. I mean, I know that the Evangelical Free Church, the EFCA, who I've been a part of, my entire life until recently, is a really good organization that, although you'll find Calvinist pastors all over in the denomination, you'll also find Arminians and Molinists. So it leaves it open to that. So that I like their statement of faith because it leaves it open. I've actually argued on our website at freethinkingministries.com that the first statement of the EFCA's statement of faith actually implies Molinism, that Molinism is the only way to make sense of that first statement. So I encourage people to go check that out and read it. All right. So without being able to say, here's the church that you need to go check out, this is the advice that I normally give people. Do some research, go online, and start examining the statement of faith of different churches, and scrutinize every point of it. If there's anything that you're like, ooh, I do not agree with this, then don't go. I mean, if there's any deal breakers there, you don't even have to go check it out. Now, if you can read their statement of faith and say, hey, I don't see anything here that's objectionable. I mean, for me, this is gonna surprise some people. It wouldn't matter to me if I went to a quote unquote Calvinist church, as long as they were not preaching philosophical determinism, right? If they were teaching determinism in the philosophical sense, then I'd be like, okay, that's unbiblical. That's opposed to Scripture, and very problematic. But most pastors who are Calvinists don't understand philosophical determinism. They don't even know what it means. I mean, I was talking to a pastor not long ago, and he said, oh, well, I'm a compatibilist. And I said, well, what do you mean by that you're a compatibilist? And he had no idea how to even define it. And basically, the way he defined it was the way I would describe Molinism. He didn't even use the term libertarian free will, but the way he described free will was libertarian. And then he said, and that God predestines all things. I'm like, well, that's my position. So here's my point. Most pastors don't even know what compatibilism is, or what is probably really entailed by a logically consistent Calvinism. So yeah, I wouldn't rule out a church just because it leans Calvinist. Okay, but if I'm reading a statement of faith and I see things, and I'm like, oh wow, this is what they believe, and if it's clear in their statement of faith that they are determinists, then I'm like, okay, well, I'm not even going to go check it out. If it's clear that they are open theists, I'm not going to go check it out. But I'd be cool with a statement of faith that leaves it open to have those discussions within the walls of that church. Awesome. And where open theists and Calvinists and Molinists and Arminians could all come and worship together. So first things first, check the statement of faith. See if there's any deal breakers in it. If there's no deal breakers and you agree with everything you're reading on the statement of faith, the next thing is to go check out the pastor. If the statement of faith is objectively correct, then go see if the pastor is consistent with the statement of faith. You might hear on the first sermon that, oh, wow, he is not consistent and he is off the rails. Okay, don't go back a second time. But I recommend checking a church out for a while and not getting fully involved and committed until you know that this is a good, solid church with a good statement of faith and good, solid teaching. Pastor and the church leadership and the elders are in a good spot. So that's number two. Make sure that number one, that the statement of faith is objectively correct. And there's no deal breakers. Number two, that the pastor, elders, and church leadership are consistent with the statement of faith. And then number three, see if the church is, if you've got little kids, you want to make sure that they've got a good kids ministry. You've got high school kids, you want to make sure the youth pastor's in a good spot. You need to see, that's the last thing. But if you meet all those three things, then you've probably found yourself a good church. Josh, what would you add?
Yeah, it's good. No, I love that you said that about hey, it's not necessarily has to be non-Calvinist. And I totally agree that most pastors, a lot of pastors, I don't know if I'd say most, especially in the free church, are they would call themselves compatibilists. And a lot of the preaching doesn't sound Calvinist when you sit in the pews and listen to it because of that. There's a lot of personal agency given to people. So I agree with all of that. One of the things I would also say is I think it is better. It is more important to make sure your church is not progressive in its theology than to make sure it's not Calvinist in its theology.
Amen to that.
Because it's going to be more damaging to your kids, to the people in the church, if it's progressive in its theology. So to me, that would be
let me add to that, man. If I was in a town, there's only two churches, and there's a hardcore deterministic 5-point Calvinist church, or going to the progressive church that affirms libertarian free will, I'm going to the Calvinist church.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I'll worship with them if they're opposed to this progressivism that's infecting the evangelical church in our nation right now.
100%. And to me, the biggest thing is, like you said, it's not even that it's Calvinist. It's, are they open to having conversations like about theological topics? One of the reasons I love the church that I'm at in Omaha is that the guy who does the theology training here is 100% open to all those sorts of things, like age of the earth, all that stuff. Let's have those conversations, because it's beautiful that the gospel is so simple that we can be saved by grace through faith because of Jesus Christ, not because of anything that we've done. And we can then explore all the nuances there and debate and argue. I think it's a gift to the church to be able to do that. And I think we should be open to that. So I would say don't like, if it's progressive, that's the big thing. And then lastly, sometimes it's hard to find the statements of faith on churches,
websites,
but they'll have a contact us page. I would say you don't even have to go hunting for it. You could just go straight to a contact us page and say, hey, I'd love to check out your church, but I would love to know what your statement of faith is. I couldn't find it on your website, or I haven't looked for it on your website. Usually they'll get back to you and send you a document or something that will have a statement of faith that you can peruse. So,
and if they don't, it's probably not a
yes. If you can't find it and their response is, oh, we don't have a statement of faith to give to you, then I would say, okay, I'll go look elsewhere. Right?
Yeah.
They should be able to give you something. And it doesn't have to be robust, like 20 pages, but they should be able to give you something. Yeah.
Hey, Abe, I want to thank you for your kind and encouraging words, and good luck. We'll be praying for you.
Let us know if you found any place. Find that, contact us, and we would love to do another one where we update some of these too. So if you watch this and you say, hey, I followed your advice, this is the church that I found, let us know. Find the contact us page again. Send us an update. We'd love to find out more about what's going on. Right. All right, let's move on. This one's from Ashley. Ashley writes, Dr. Stratton has said, and I think this is going to be another political one, so you're going to make me answer it. I'm just kidding. So Dr. Stratton has said, to not speak is to speak, and to not act is to act. Well, it's kind of a paraphrase of what a lot of people have said in the past, but when referring to our duties to vote in our country. But this line of thinking further complicates my struggles with the idea that mere permission does not exist. Calvin postulated that God does not have the capacity to merely permit anything. He is in his direct decision to not intervene, he makes the positive choice that evil shall go forward. I am by no means Calvinist. I don't think everything has been decreed. I want to believe that evil is our doing and not his, as Calvinists say when it is convenient. Yet God has the power for things to be otherwise, and yet things are not otherwise, thus implying that these are the things God has ordained by not stopping them from occurring. Now loop this back to the political debate regarding our votes. The special pleading leaves a taste in my mouth. Give me the tools to think about this in a new way. The appeals to mystery do not cut it. So if I were to boil down this, see if you're tracking with what I'm thinking. What Ashley is saying is, if we are saying you should speak up in the face of abject evil, or you are actually acting in favor of that evil, like if that's kind of what we're saying, not to vote is to vote, then could we then say that God, in not acting in the face of evil, is actually commiserate in that evil? Let me know, Ashley, if I am paraphrasing that incorrectly. Tim, do you think that's kind of what she's saying? So she's saying, your appeal to this for a vote is kind of special pleading. Is that what you heard, or am I?
Yeah, I think so. First of all, as a Molinist, I do believe that all things are decreed, just not determined, right? So that means in God's decree, he's created a world in which he knows he created a world in which he knew what would happen if he were to create this specific world. And so we can also say he's created a world now in which he knows what will happen. It was decreed, but his decree does not determine these things to happen. They are, in a very real sense, still, the future is still open. Shout out to my open theist friends. It's open in the sense that there is nothing deterministically making these things happen. It does not violate your libertarian freedom. There's nothing deterministically preventing one thing happening over the other. It's just that God knows. He's got middle knowledge. He's omniscient. He knows what will happen, even though nothing is making it happen. So, that's one thing that popped out when Ashley said that she does not believe that all things are decreed. I'm just going to say, before I start to get into the nuts and bolts of your question, that I do believe, as a Molinist, that all things are decreed and predestined, just not determined. In my book, I have a deductive argument that, logically and deductively concludes that predestination and determinism ought not be conflated. They're two different things. And I think a big problem is so many people improperly conflate those two ideas, but they should not be conflated. So with that said, speaking against evil, we ought to, because the greatest command is to love God and love our neighbors. Paul makes it clear in Galatians 5:14, and also in Romans. Can't think of the specific address right now, but he makes it clear that the entire law of Christ is summed up in loving our neighbors as ourselves. So that's what drove everything for me in this last political season. I had my neighbors in mind. I was trying to be informed about what it means, I was trying to be as informed as possible about all the issues, and then comparing that to my neighbors, the least of these, people that I've been commanded to love, and what it means to love then is to protect. That's part of it. If you love someone, you brought up our families earlier. I'm commanded to protect my family as a man of the house. Because I love them. If I'm in an opportunity to protect my neighbors, I would do the same thing. I just think that that's what drives, back to the article that I brought up earlier, the love thy neighbor and pack thy heat. It's all about love, So let me back up.
So how does that relate though to, because what she said was, well, if God's not acting in the face of evil, like that's kind of her counterexample.
Well, look, we don't have middle knowledge like God does. So God created a world in which he knew, and it's for us to learn, right? He's preparing us to be citizens in the kingdom of God and citizens of heaven. Paul talks about how these light momentary afflictions prepare us for an eternal weight of glory beyond all comparison. So this place, this earth is like a filter. It's filtering out. Think about if you've got pure water in your house. you've got this filter that the water runs through, and then it's purified before it comes out and you can drink it. But this world is kind of like a filter to heaven for us, for Christians, and it's filtering out all the bad, and we're learning from it. Now, in that, we're learning how to treat others. We're learning how to love others. We don't have perfect counterfactual knowledge or middle knowledge. We just know what God's commanded us to do. Now, God, on the other hand, has perfect knowledge. So he stands in a position which we don't understand, which we don't, where he knows that it is what evils he needs to allow for the betterment of us as we're being filtered and transformed into citizens of heaven. God doesn't have commands issued to him. We have commands issued to us. Now, again, people get tired of me using this as a illustration, but we can go back to the Avengers movies and look at Doctor Strange. Doctor Strange allowed tremendous evil, evil that he had the power to stop. I mean, he did not have to give Thanos the time stone. He wasn't determined to do so, but he did the unthinkable. And he did that. Why? Because he had perfect knowledge of what would happen if he did so. And he knew that the best end game, the name of the second of the following movie, the best end game was to do that and to allow great evil, because it led to the most flourishing and the best possible world in that scenario. So if we don't look down at Doctor Strange for that, we better not look down at God for that, because he knows even more than Doctor Strange does. So that's how I would answer it in a nutshell. What would you add to it?
I think that's good. And I think to kind of piggyback on that, to say, in a really strange way, Doctor Strange, in a really strange way, that is actually acting up in the face of evil to make sure that evil is eradicated once and for all. Just because it doesn't happen on our time frame, because we think that it would be better if God intervened now. Like you said, we don't have all the knowledge that he does. So apparently it is not better. And her last thing was a punt to mystery. I don't think this is a punt to mystery. It's not a punt at all. It's an explanation of God's knowledge to say that we don't have the knowledge that he does, which means that when we have a sensed moral obligation for all the information that we have in relation to voting, that it is still, it can still be the case that we are violating our moral obligations to not vote or to not act in the face of evil. Mm-hmm. Whereas if God allows evil to occur, he knows that the outcome will be better when he allows it. We don't know that. So we can only operate with what we do know. Mm-hmm. So that's what I would say.
Yeah. And I don't think that's punting to mystery. That's an explanation.
Yeah, I don't think so either. Yeah. All right, let's move on. We got to start moving on here. This one will be quick because I don't think either. Well, we'll see. Maybe you know. This is from Adam, not our friend Adam Johnson, someone else. This is from Adam, and it says, "Hi guys, I wonder if you have heard of Stephen. I don't know how to say this name. Meitzen's defense of a version of naturalistic determinism in his book Death, Determinism, and Meaning. Would you guys be open to reviewing that book? Kind regards, Adam." I have never heard of this person or the book.
Me neither.
Okay. So we'll move on. You know what? We would be open to it, but we've got a lot of other irons in the fire right now. I'm currently going.
Go ahead. Finish your thought.
I'm currently going through like Jordan Peterson's new book. I'm going to be writing a review of that. It's really pretty good, by the way, for where I've been so far. That's another topic for another time. Tim's in the middle of writing a bunch of books and doing a lot of other things. We've got some other things coming down as far the pike as far as it goes. So I'm not opposed to looking at this book and reviewing it if it offers some new information. It's just not on our list right now, but maybe it should be on our list. Okay,
yeah,
that's all I had to say.
The thesis of the book was again?
Death, Determinism, and Meaning. And it's Stephen Meitzen, Maitzen. Maybe I'm saying that wrong. Maybe it's Meitzen or Maitzen. I don't know. Stephen Meitzen. So we'll look into it, and we might look at it if you.
Yeah. If any of our viewers have read the book, give us your comments or your thoughts in the comments below.
Oh yes, I can do this now. Boom! Drop a comment in our. Yes, there you go.
I didn't know you could do that.
Drop a comment below If you,
What else are you keeping from me here?
that's it. That's it. Just that. Just that. That was the surprise. All right. This is from Shane, who is a Reasonable Faith chapter director from Tuscaloosa.
Tuscaloosa. Well, I'm sure
Tuscaloosa, Alabama. Roll
I'm sure-
Tide. Ugh, that made me feel sick just saying it. But
High tide, guys. You seen that commercial?
yeah, his name is Shane. So I don't know if you know Shane.
I might. What's his last? Oh, you can't tell his last name.
I'm not going to tell his last name.
Probably no. I probably have interacted with him.
Yeah. So Shane is a Reasonable Faith director in Tuscaloosa. Now he's got a bunch of questions. I don't know if we're going to get through all of them here. We might save this for its own episode later, but I want to start with it anyway. He's got a few thoughts that he's trying to straighten out. Any insight you could help would be huge personal help. He loves your work. He thinks you're clear and thorough, but he's a little confused with the total sum of the circumstances we find ourselves in and related to our decisions. So a few points. If a free agent were placed in identical sets of antecedent conditions, could that person choose differently, or would they choose the same every time? That's the first question.
If the same person was put in the same set, well, there would be nothing deterministically preventing him from doing otherwise, but it seems to me he would still choose the same way every time. But it doesn't mean he's determined, and it doesn't mean he couldn't do otherwise. It's like that rollback illustration or objection. I've heard it posed different ways. But if you had the ability to roll back time like a VCR tape, which I don't think is metaphysically impossible, or I do think is metaphysically impossible. You could not do that. I don't believe. I don't think.
I was going to say.
Yeah, I don't think time travel is metaphysically possible on the A or B theory of time, unless it was a B theory of time combined with idealism, and that's which I have.
Idealism is the magic bullet.
Idealism.
Yeah.
If idealism is true, all bets are off. But so if you're not an idealist, I don't think time travel is.
Yeah. So if you could,
let's just suppose you can. Okay.
Yeah.
If you could rewind time, I'd be in the same person in the exact same situation. And so it seems to me I would freely choose in a libertarian sense the same way every time, because it's not random. People think just because it's not determined that it's random, and that's just not true.
You still have reasons for your choice.
Yeah, and the manner in which you choose to reason would still be the same, even though nothing is preventing you from doing otherwise. So what is really important here is sourcehood libertarianism, that something or someone else is not determining the manner in which I drive the ship of reason, the manner in which I choose to deliberate. So,
so let me interrupt for a second. So he kind of adds on. He says, "You say circumstances are insufficient to causally determine your choices." Mm-hmm. Yes, but does that make our free choices isolated from the circumstances we are in? I would say that's no, right?
Yeah, that's right. You're right.
Yeah.
That they're completely they're influenced but not determined. So an event is determined if the antecedent conditions are sufficient to necessitate said event. So then, looking at your choice as an event, your choice would be determined not by you, but by something or someone else if the antecedent conditions were sufficient to necessitate the choice that you experience making, but it would not be yours. It would be grounded in antecedent conditions. Now, on my view, as a libertarian free thinker, the antecedent conditions are sufficient to influence your choice, not to necessitate. So you don't make choices in a vacuum, but there's nothing determining you to think one way or the other. You're a free agent who can freely choose to navigate these issues and think things through. And the best way to show that that's the case is to show the impossibility of the contrary. And that's what the free thinking arguments and the deity of deception arguments, those things, they show that, look, if it's determined, then you're going to lose the ability to possess knowledge of metaphysical and theological issues. So they've got to be free in a libertarian sense, but they can't be random either. So in my paper that I wrote with JP Moreland, we show that there's 4 options at the end of the day. Your thoughts and beliefs are either determined by mindless. Now let's talk about your metaphysical beliefs. They're either determined by mindless stuff that knows nothing about metaphysics and doesn't care if you do either. And so that's an undercutting defeater. Or they're determined by a deity of deception who determines all of his followers and everybody else to affirm false metaphysical beliefs. All right. Now that's going to even apply to the metaphysical beliefs we're discussing here. So that's an undercutting defeater that takes away justification for that belief, and therefore you could not possess knowledge of it. 3, it could be completely random and unassociated with antecedent conditions and reason or whatsoever. And so that's an undercutting defeater. So that leaves us with the best explanation that you were created by God with the power to be a libertarian free thinker, to infer the truth about metaphysical reality, which includes theology. But it only works if, and really, the resurrection, the historical argument for the resurrection is probably the best argument for Christianity in particular. But I've taken the free thinking argument further recently and showed that the best explanation of all of this isn't just the existence of God, but the God that Jesus revealed in Scripture. So it's it can get us to an argument for Christianity in particular, not just the existence of God, not just the existence of the soul, but the specific view that there's a God of truth, John 14:6, who desires all people to know the truth. 1 Timothy 2:4, so we can be transformed by the renewing of our minds. Romans 12:2, so we can take thoughts captive. 2 Corinthians 10:5, before bad thinking takes us captive. Colossians 2:8, so that we can reason together. Isaiah 1:18. It's the biblical view of God that makes the most sense of our power and ability to freely think in such a way that we can infer truth about metaphysical reality. And if any deterministic or just plain random view is true, we could not do such things. So if one really believes that we have the power to infer the truth about metaphysical reality and to gain knowledge of metaphysical reality, which includes theology, then you got to affirm libertarian freedom.
Okay. There you go. You're in your sweet spot when you're right there. That was good. So he has a follow up to that, and then he's got a few more that we might talk about a different time. But I think this kind of sums up. So he's asked those questions. I think we've answered them. So he says he brings this up because it seems like when we talk about Molinism, we always discuss possible worlds as being just changes in circumstances in which God knows how we would choose. And then he says, however, if only the changing of circumstances results in a different choice by the creature, then wouldn't it just be these antecedent conditions that affect our decisions? Off the top of my head, let me know if you're right. All of that is kind of correct, except for effect doesn't equal determine.
Yes.
And that's right. Different, right?
If I'm in if I'm looking at 2 trees, and one is a peach tree and one's an apple tree, I will be able to choose between those 2. But if I'm in a different circumstance where you've got an orange tree and a lemon tree, I'm going to choose between. Well, I'm in a different circumstance, so I've got to freely choose differently in that circumstance. So yeah, the circumstances are going to have a huge impact on the manner in which we freely choose. But that doesn't mean that they determine me. Now, sometimes they do. Look, just to add on here, I do not argue that we always exercise a libertarian freedom in the sense that I always have the ability to choose otherwise. It's I know I'm going to confuse some people here, but I affirm that there is a kind of freedom that is compatible with determinism, and that this explains a lot of the kinds of choices we make on a day-to-day level. Like when I look at the menu, I like to talk about when I go to the restaurant. There's this restaurant here in town that my wife and I love to go to. We usually go to on a Tuesday night, and it's Taco Tuesday. Now,
do I know this restaurant?
Jersey's.
Love Jersey. Okay. Yeah. I've been there. It's good.
Taco John's always has Taco Tuesday as well.
Yes.
But
It's a little bit different.
yeah, Jersey's is more of a sports bar kind of place. So
Yeah.
we like to go and watch the sports and eat tacos. So now I'll look at the menu, but when I think about it, it's like, okay, I've got specific DNA that wasn't up to me. I don't get to freely choose my DNA. I wish I could, because if I did, I would have played in the NBA.
Yes.
Right. My NBA, my DNA was not up to me. Now that DNA determines my taste buds, right? And so I really like tacos, right? So when I look at the menu, it seems to me, when I'm considering what my taste buds desire, and the fact that it's a good price, and I like to, save money so I can have more money to spend on guns. So I don't know.
More money to spend on meat ammo.
On meat, no, well, I get, they hook me up. So
Yeah.
Thank you, meat
It's all
ammo.
right. Just
Yeah.
play into the bid here, Tim.
Yeah, no, I do. I do purchase meat ammo also. I don't get it all for free. Just my competition shooting.
Okay.
Okay. So it could be the case that I really don't have the power or ability to order the burritos that night, or the nachos, or the hamburger, or whatever. The chicken wings. They have good chicken wings too. Maybe I don't have the power to do otherwise, but to get the tacos that night, because that's my greatest desire at that moment. And so the compatibilists will say, well, you choose your greatest desire at the moment of choice. I'll say that's always the case. I'm like, okay, you might be right when it comes to tacos, but look, if I choose my metaphysical beliefs because Molinism is my greatest desire, that's the furthest thing from rationality. If the Calvinist is choosing his Calvinist beliefs because he has a greatest desire for Calvinism to be true, in the words of Ben Shapiro, facts don't care about your feelings or your greatest desires. That is the furthest thing from rationality. A rational person does not choose his beliefs based upon his greatest desires. So compatibilism does not work when it comes to rational or epistemic responsibility. It might work when you're ordering off the menu and you're getting tacos instead of the hamburger, but it doesn't work with epistemic responsibility. Two different things. That's why I'm focused on rationality and epistemic responsibility.
All right. We may do an entire program on some of the follow-up questions. Please reach out to us if anybody that we're answering questions to, if you see this, reach out to us if we misunderstood your question, or if you've got follow-ups, we'd love to follow that up down the line as well. But let's move on here. Our next question comes from Gary, and Gary says this. He says, if the Gospels are historically reliable as you claim, then there should be agreement among the four Gospels regarding the major details of important events in the Jesus story. Differences in minor details can be chalked up to normal lapses in memory, but the important details about major events should corroborate. Any court of law would demand that. In addition, Christians claim that first-century Jews, being an oral culture, maintained the meticulous accuracy of their oral stories. So why is it then that the four Gospels do not agree upon when, where, and who first discovered the body of Jesus? The body of Jesus was missing from the tomb. If the early Christians couldn't correctly maintain the accuracy of that major event, why should we trust them with the accuracy of the rest of their tall tales? Read Michael Licona. Here, I got, hold on. There we go. This book.
Yeah, that'll answer your question, Gary. That'll answer your question. Yeah, Gary referenced what was important in the culture back then. Well, that's a good job. You're doing the first step of hermeneutics, is understanding the culture. Well, what Mike Licona has done and satisfied me, and I've been, he's a good friend, but I did really try to test his book out here, and his ideas out here, and I am currently satisfied with his approach. What he has shown is that the Gospels are written in the genre, or probably written in a genre, either equal to or similar enough to that of Greco-Roman biography. Now, so that's what's important here is, does Mike Licona make a good case that the Gospels are written in the genre equal to or similar to that of Greco-Roman biography? I'm satisfied that he's right there. If that's the case, what are the compositional devices employed in Greco-Roman biography written 2,000 years ago? And Mike has been thorough about that and showed why the gospel authors would use specific language and compositional devices, as he says, to communicate the same story differently. And we would then expect to see some of these differences. So you've got to handle, when you're doing hermeneutics, you've got to handle what you're reading as it was written and the day it was written. And so what Mike's book has gone on to demonstrate satisfactorily, in my opinion, is that these issues that Gary is bringing up, these objections, really, that they melt away once you understand both the genre and the compositional devices employed at the time. And if we try to read these ancient, this ancient literature and these ancient biographies through modern day lenses, well, the errors aren't going to be in the ancient literature. The errors are going to be on our part. We got to get rid of the modern day lenses and put on some ancient lenses to read the ancient writings. So yes, I agree with you, Josh, and point Gary to Mike Licona's work.
Yeah.
He's got 2 books, one pop level book that you just showed, Jesus Contradicted, and then a more scholarly book talking about gospel differences. So
I think it's called Why Are There Differences in the Gospels or something like that.
Right.
One of the things I would add to it too. First, I want to just do an example from the objection that he brought up. So he brought up the who first discovered Jesus' body is missing from the tomb. I believe Mike says that the compositional device being used here is spotlighting. So while we know there are more people, they're spotlighting Mary. Well, even though we know, and I think he points to, remember, I'm going off of memory from what he wrote. I think he points to the fact that just a few lines down, then it says like the third person plural for the group. So that gospel writer recognizes that more than just Mary was at the tomb. But he is only focusing in on Mary and spotlighting. So there's a lot of ways. There's a lot of ways that the gospel authors do that. And then the last thing I would say is, now I don't know how major you're saying, because you said they need to agree on the major things. I actually would think that they do agree on almost all of the major things.
Yeah.
Now, what you consider major and what I consider major might be different, but the fact that Jesus rose from the grave, they all agree on that. Yeah. That's a pretty major thing. Right. The fact that his disciples discovered that and that the women discovered it first, that's a pretty major thing. They all agree on that. So to me, I think they agree mostly on the major things. And then the last thing I'll say, and then we can move on, is Tim and I had a long discussion with Dr. Licona on our YouTube channel, and so I'll try to remember to post that in the description of this channel, so you can go back and even watch that interview. And then hopefully within the next month, we're actually going to employ some of these practices in analyzing a debate that was had over the Gospels with Dr. Mike Licona. So look for that in the future as well.
You know, just to add on, Mike and others have shared this story before, how this historical story and reports that when the Titanic was sinking, the survivors who were, if you've seen the Titanic movie, those who were in rafts or holding on to floating pieces of debris to save their lives, like Leonardo DiCaprio for a while. Well, he then drowned, I guess. Yeah. So bad. Not a survivor.
There's not enough room on the big door.
That's right. So I look at that, and so the survivors, they were all in disagreement about this huge boat over if it broke into 2 pieces or not. And you had a big percentage of them saying that it broke into 2 pieces. Another big percentage saying, you guys are crazy. It did not break into two pieces. Well, now we know, we finally found it, and we know that it did break in two pieces. But how would you have this disagreement? And some would call that, well, it's a minor issue because they all agreed that the Titanic sank. But nobody, before they found the Titanic, was saying, well, they can't disagree on this minor issue. Others are saying that's a huge issue. But hey, they all agreed that it sank. Nobody left saying, well, they can't agree on if it broke in two pieces or not. So I guess the Titanic didn't sink. No, that's not how it works. You're like, okay, everybody agreed that it sank. Now, I don't know why there's this disagreement here. Another story, I brought this up to Mike before. I was watching a documentary on the flight that I can't remember the pilot, but he had to land it in the Hudson River. You know what I'm talking about?
Oh, yeah. That's Tom Hanks, right?
Tom Hanks was the pilot. Yeah.
Yeah. He played the name. Why can't I remember the name? Because they named the movie after
Captain Phillips. Was that it?
Yeah. No, that's
who's that?
I think that's like a boat that gets taken over by Somali pirates or something like that.
And he was in that movie too. I don't know. I'm getting. Okay, look, it doesn't matter.
Okay, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
Everybody knows the airplane that took off from New York hit some birds or something, and it was going down, and he miraculously landed it in the Hudson River and saved everybody. Sully. That's right.
There we go.
Captain Phillips. Okay. So yeah, Sully. All right, look, I was watching a documentary on that, and the passengers to this day are all arguing over if a fire broke out in the main cabin or not. Some people are saying, no, there was a fire going. Flight attendants were using the fire extinguishers to put out the fire. And others are saying, what are you talking about? There is no fire, right? But that doesn't mean people are saying, well, I guess Sully didn't land the airplane in the Hudson. No, everybody agreed on the big things. There's some other things that we would consider minor peripheral issues. And some would say, well, that's actually more of a bigger issue than others are, the way they're thinking about it. But the fact of the matter is, the bigger issue is what everybody agreed upon. When it comes to the gospel, the main thing is that, hey, they killed Jesus and then he was alive again. And that is the biggest thing. And that's what Christianity hinges upon. And so there can be this disagreements on these smaller things. But really, when you understand genre and compositional devices, I think those quote unquote disagreements, they melt away. They just aren't problems for me anymore. So.
Yeah, it's really changed so much for me as I've been able to employ those. Like it's made reading the Gospels richer. It's just it's great. All right, let's move on. So if you want to push back, please do, and send us another message. All right, this one's from Matthew. And we got questions about Job last time, too. We're getting questions about Job this time. So Matthew says, why did God say to Satan in Job, have you considered my servant Job? And why did God say to Satan, you can do whatever you want to him, but do not kill him? If God knew Satan would kill his family, why give him power to do so and then feel that it's unfair towards Job? The rest of the story isn't the issue for me. It's the beginning. The part where God offers Job up like he means nothing to God. Here, I'll kind of take this one since you've been having to talk a lot. So one of the things that I would say about this is recognizing that this is really kind of a cosmic loyalty test. So Job means a lot to God. That's actually why God offers him up to Satan. He offers him up as an example. He doesn't offer him up as a sacrifice. God isn't saying, have you considered attacking Job? He says, here's an example. Have you considered him? God is literally proud of Job. That's why he's offering him as an example. And Satan says, well, he only has all that stuff because you've blessed him with all this stuff. And so God says, no, I know the character of the person that I'm bringing this up to. And Satan goes, well, no, you don't know. You've just blessed them. Who wouldn't love you for blessing all this stuff? And so what God does is say, hey, basically, this is the way I see it. God says, okay, do what you want, but he's not going to disown me. That isn't God giving Satan power. He actually restricts Satan power. He says, do what you want, but you better not kill him. Like it's better read that way.
Yeah.
So it's not like and God does know what Satan's going to do, but ultimately think about what the story of Job has accomplished over the history of time. Whether or not Job is a real character, we could get into whether or not he's a real character. But if he's a real character, what has happened to this because of the story of Job over the history of humanity through Judaism and Christianity that has brought God glory.
Yeah.
You could see that God allowing Satan to do this really myopic thing where he attacks one person actually ends up glorifying God more and ends up encouraging Job at the end of the book even more. In fact, remember at the end of the book, God says to Job's friends, my anger burns against you because you have not spoken true of me as my servant Job has. So Job, even though he challenges God, never loses, in God's eyes anyway, who's the most important judge, right?
Yeah.
Never loses the uprightness that he had at the beginning of the book. Now, God says, you better remember who you're talking to, Job. It's kind of like when your kid talks back to you, even though they they're right to say, hey, why I don't understand why this stuff is happening to me. And you go, okay, remember who you're talking to. I'm still your dad. That's kind of the response. So that's really simplistic, but that's the way I would frame it. It's not God handing all this power over to Satan to say, all right, go torture this guy. I think it's different than that. So anything you would add, Tim, to what I said there?
No. Hit the ball out of the park.
Yeah. And because of God's middle knowledge, he knows exactly how Job's going to respond. And he knows all the counterfactuals and how the benefits of this story happening throughout history, bringing glory to God and bringing people comfort in the midst of great difficulty. So
perfect.
Yeah. All right, let's move on.
I'm Tim Stratton, and I endorse that message.
We should need to have like a 2025. You might be watching this in 2025. All right, this is from our friend Ariana. She has messaged multiple times. So Ariana, thank you for being a faithful follower of FreeThinking Ministries and messaging. So she says, hey, it's Ariana again. I've seen y'all posted a video answering the Pharaoh question, which was amazing. Thank you. So this is the follow-up that we've been asking for. Good. Thank you. She says, sorry, I talk a lot, but here's my question. Ariana, don't apologize. You're good. Right, Tim?
That's right. We want this. This is what we
want.
For.
This. So this is why the Contact Us page exists.
That's right.
All right. I know you agree with the Franklin case. I don't know if I spelled his name correctly. Franklin cases. Frankfurt cases, maybe?
Frankfurt, yeah.
Is that what she's saying? Okay. Frankfurt cases. But I will summarize it here. A mad scientist goes into John's brain. John freely chose option A over option B freely. However, he couldn't have done otherwise.
Yep.
However, I stumbled through an issue. So one of my fellow friends said, whatever prevents John from choosing option B is the cause of her choosing A. Like, for example, we as humans can't fly, considering that whatever prevents me to fly causally determines me, if that makes sense. So we don't have the capacity to fly. The objector claim, by the way. I'm not a philosopher expert, and I would really want to know the answer to this question whenever you can. All right, does that make sense to you?
All right. So let me unpack it a little bit.
Okay.
And then you can kind of reframe it if you need to. So Frankfurt cases, we look at probably the most popular one is where a mad scientist, unbeknownst to this person, has implanted microchips in the guy's brain so that because he wants let's say he wants Donald Trump to win. Okay, so he doesn't want Kamala Harris to win, so he implants. And he thinks it's going to be a close election. And he thinks it might just come down to this one guy's vote. Right? You bear with this thought experiment here. And so he implants. We could say he did this to a whole bunch of people, but let's just talk about Joe. Joe the voter. And so he puts these microchips in Joe's brain so that he can monitor what Joe is doing and what he's thinking, and even actually can see what he's doing through his eyes. I don't know. It's got some crazy technology. And as Joe goes into the voting booth, the mad scientist is ready, because if Joe starts to vote for Kamala Harris, then he's going to flip the switch, and Joe will stop, and he will then be determined and controlled to vote for Trump. However, if Joe doesn't choose to vote for Harris and votes for Trump, then the mad scientist does nothing and doesn't determine him to do anything. So in a situation like this, Joe cannot do anything other than vote for Trump. And so you say, well, see, you don't have to have the ability to do otherwise to have libertarian freedom. And hold that thought for a second. Riley, what's up, man? All right, thanks, man. Yep. So yeah, you'll say, okay, well, see, Joe couldn't do otherwise. So he doesn't have libertarian freedom. And I say, no, well, not so fast. He does have libertarian freedom. He had the power and the ability to choose whether he was going to vote for Harris or Trump. He thought it through. Nothing determined his deliberations. He was a libertarian free thinker. So libertarian free will isn't destroyed in this thought experiment. It's highlighted by this thought experiment. He was a libertarian free thinker, which is what FreeThinking Ministries is all about. Are you free to think or not? Now, in this situation, he is determined not to vote for Harris by someone else. Who will make sure that he doesn't vote for Harris. But you see here, if he freely chooses by his own free thinking deliberation to vote for Trump, and the mad scientist doesn't flip any switches, he's just free to vote for Trump in a libertarian sense, because he was free to deliberate and choose who he was going to vote for. And if he would have decided to vote for Harris, he was free to try to vote for Harris, even though he couldn't have actually physically moved his body in such a way to cast a vote for her. So in my mind, these Frankfurt thought experiments is, I can't.
That's right.
Experiments.
We've been going for an hour. It's hard. Yeah.
These Frankfurt thought experiments do not destroy libertarian freedom. It highlights it. It highlights libertarian free thinking, which is what the free thinking argument is all about, which is what FreeThinking Ministries highlights. So, all right. With that said, have I answered her question, or do you need to?
What she says is, one of her friends said, whatever prevented John from choosing option B is the cause of him choosing A.
No, that's not true. So let's say that A is Trump and Harris is B. Joe freely chose to vote for Trump, or option A here. Nothing determined that for Joe except for Joe. So here, Joe has, he's the source of his free thinking, and in a libertarian sense then, and he had the power during his deliberations to think otherwise, even if he never did. So the cause was Joe here, not something or someone else. So if you are the cause and determiner of your own thoughts and actions, physical or mental actions, then you are a libertarian agent. Now, if Joe would have tried to vote for Trump, and then the mad scientist flipped the switch, then the mad scientist would have been the cause and the source of the vote for Harris. But it doesn't work the other way.
Yeah. So, Ariana, let us know if we're understanding your question correctly there. She gave that example of, for example, we as humans can't fly, considering that whatever prevents me from causally determines me. Now, I don't know that, like, that's just, we don't have the capability of flight. I guess our DNA determines us not to be able to fly. But even in that sense, well, we can't fly like a bird, but I can get on a plane. Right. So it's like,
and you have the power to try to fly. I mean, it's led to the death of many people over the years.
That is
true.
Yes.
You do. There's nothing stopping you from trying. I mean, man, when I was a little kid, I'd watch Superman, and then I'd be like, okay, I got to try this, and I'd run as fast as I could and leap in the air, thinking, wow, that's going to work this time. Never worked, but I could freely choose to try.
Yeah.
So that's the thing. Are you free to?
So there are things.
Try. Yeah.
There are things like DNA wise that like determine us not to be able to do things, or to be able to do things. Like I am a male, so biologically, I am determined I cannot be a female no matter how much I try. Right. But that's not necessarily
that's controversial these days.
Yeah, I know. That's why I said it. All right. So let us know if we understood that, Ariana. I don't know if I'm saying your name right, but here you go. She also has another question. I believe it's the same person. Okay. She says, regarding the free thinking argument, Tim, if God can't know otherwise, how can he have a justified belief? I guess what she means is if God can't know what is going to happen, if he can't know otherwise. To me, this question doesn't really follow.
So my position is that God knows with certainty how.
Yeah, and so I guess she's saying if he can't know, like if he can't know otherwise, like if he can't know if he can't know
something false, well, you can't know a false proposition. Because again, knowledge requires justified true belief, so you can't possess knowledge of false propositions.
Yeah. So again, Ariana, let us know if we're understanding that question and write in again to clarify, and we'll get to another. Because to me that was maybe it's our faulty understanding of the question. I don't know.
Yeah, get back to us.
Yep. All right, this one is from Kent.
Wait, let me ask you. How many questions we got left?
Let's see. This is the last one.
Oh, okay.
Last one. This one is from Kent. This is the last question. It says, I'm trying to understand how the new covenant found in Jeremiah 31 and the following chapters. This, if you don't know Jeremiah 31, it's God talking to the people in exile, saying he's going to make a covenant with them, and he's promising a Messiah. So he's trying to understand how the new covenant found in Jeremiah 31 and the following chapters will be fulfilled. Is it determined, and thus it will happen, or will this be fulfilled based on the free will decisions of people?
I think Kent is making the mistake that I referred to earlier here of conflating determinism with predestination. Mm-hmm. Yes, I agree that it will happen. But just because something will happen does not mean it will happen necessarily, or mean the antecedent conditions were sufficient to necessitate said event. So, yes, as a Molinist, I'm going to say it was predestined, and so it will happen, but disagree with him and say, no, it was not determined.
Yeah.
I.e., it was not, the antecedent conditions were insufficient to necessitate what will happen. But that doesn't mean what will happen won't happen.
Yeah. So to be fair to Kent, he doesn't actually state a position. He asks the question of, is it determined or is it free will choices that will make this come about? He's giving two options.
So it's free will choices.
Yeah.
That will make it come about, and God knows it.
And I will say, and then I think we can probably close after this, unless you got more to say. But I'll say sometimes determinists will say stuff like, I don't think God is all powerful because he can't get all that he wants. And my response is kind of an answer to this question to say, an all-powerful God being to actualize a world in which free people using their free libertarian free will, and he still gets what he wants, mm-hmm. That's more powerful to me.
Amen to that.
Than a God that has to tinker and make sure everyone's making exactly the decision he wants them to make in order to get what he wants. To me, it's more powerful to be able to create a world and say, you can choose all you want, but I can actualize a world in which everything comes about ultimately for my glory and for my end. Like, to me, the middle knowledge, the Molinist perspective actually has a greater view of God's omniscience and omnipotence.
Yeah.
So,
amen to that. Maximally great being.
Yep. And you know, Tim, that I have, for many years, knowing you, have kicked against the goads, as it were, to gloss myself a Molinist, that sort of thing. But over time, it's just, and people could say, well, it's just because you're so closely tied to Tim and stuff like that. That may be the case. Tim could have determined me to end up this way. Perhaps that's the case.
Well, I did, unbeknownst to you, implant some microchips. in your brain.
But I remember one of our first conversations was me saying, "Oh, this sounds a lot like what I've always believed in studying the book of Romans in Scripture." You remember that?
Yeah, I do.
And so it's interesting because I'm not a former Calvinist, so I will never get the charge of, well, you were never really a Calvinist, because I was never really a Calvinist. But when people say things like Gabriel Hughes said something on Twitter the other day, it's like, I'm not a Calvinist. I don't believe, and he listed off all the doctrines that Calvinists believe in, like I don't believe in perseverance of the saints. I don't believe in unlimited election, and those. And it's because of Calvin. I believe in them because I read the Bible. And I just kind of quipped and was like, well, then how do you know all those terms? Those terms aren't in the Bible.
Right.
Clearly you believe them. But when I was just as a layperson studying the Bible, I came to realize that determinism didn't make sense. But I told you I lived within that tension. And then middle knowledge Molinism helped resolve that tension. So
yeah, we're not allowed to keep our rationality cards and to live in tension between contradictory propositions. We aren't allowed to do that. There's times when we can live within mystery, like, for example, like I believe, and I justified belief, that God created the universe from nothing ex nihilo. We have evidence of that. When somebody says, well, how did God have the power to create physical stuff from nothing? I'll say, beats the heck out of me.
Yeah.
I have no idea. Right. So there's a mystery there, but it's not a contradiction.
Yeah.
And so that's the kind of mystery we're allowed to live in. I will not, as a systematic theologian, I cannot affirm two propositions that are contradictory, that do not work together. And so I'm very careful to avoid that.
100%. 100%. All right. Well, that is the 13 burning questions. I don't know if we did 13, but I'm going to say it's 13 burning questions. Hour and a half in. God bless you, everyone that's watched this. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year. And as we always say here at FreeThinking Ministries,
stay reasonable.